Welcome back. Okay, so we have here our core, which I've rearranged. The two taped faces are still essentially next to each other aside from the gap in between, and of course this gap is now perfectly centered because the two taped faces, of course, are the ones that are perfectly centered from our earlier alignment. So this piece, if we lay it in here, actually first let me make sure that, remember, give your pieces a couple of quick rotations to make sure that they're perfectly centered. And remember, as you're doing this, not to put undue stress on the middle edge pieces or these little extensions here. Now I realize it's rather tough to do. It is easier to do though if you have filled in these inside edges with putty already. If you've prepared the core by this point, it'll be much easier to work with because you won't have to worry about breaking the very thin little pieces here, which again I don't really care because this will all get repaired on my own time later. But again, you properly fill it now and you won't have to deal with that. Okay, in any case, all I'm gonna do is move these outer layers into position so that this edge piece will be held as straight as possible and next to these, between the two edges. Now you might ask yourself, okay, well, how do I ensure that this piece does not wobble too much? Because if it's level here but not level there, again the piece is going to be misaligned. By now you should pretty much have your answer. Hint, cut strips of the post-it note, because, well, you won't need them anymore actually for any more alignment purposes. So you can certainly cut strips and do this sort of thing. Lay on a couple of layers and put on an even number of layers in such a manner that along both sides here, just keep building up even number on each side until both are level with each other. But honestly, again, for these pieces I tend to do them by hand. I simply just use my fingertips. Now maybe it's because I've done this many times, but I find that just by feeling for it, this can be perfectly centered. Alright, so again, well, how are we going to glue this in place? In this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to rely on our two-part epoxy. Why our two-part epoxy? Well, because of course this sets up in 5 minutes. This takes hours to set up. We don't want to wait that long, and plus remember, we are sort of on the clock. Let me do another quick test here. Alright, so I can still cut little slices of it pretty easily, which means that when the time comes, I should be able to free our two initial edges, pull free those pieces pretty easily. So anyway, I'm going to mix up a quick batch here and then get going with the two extra pieces, and then we will continue with our edges. Alright, I've mixed myself some epoxy here. I'm just going to take some here, take my edge piece, and I'm going to fill it like a cup. How much? I like to fill it essentially so that the epoxy lies just below the lowest level of the middle edge here, so it acts like a cup, so there's nothing overflowing. And the reason I want to do that is because when I stick the piece in, of course, the corner pieces or the edge piece is going to displace some of the putty or the epoxy, and of course if you have too much it'll spill over. So all I do is this, and again you can use that little bit of a guide if you want, but I just use my fingertips, take my piece and just set it on top, slide it right in, set it on top, and I just hold it there. How long do you hold it there? you know, 5 minutes. That's all I need to do, just hold it in place for 5 minutes. You don't want to, you know, move it around too much, but it's pretty thick, it's pretty viscous stuff, so it's not like gonna totally, you know, spill over the edge if you don't hold it perfectly still or perfectly straight. But that's all it takes, just a little bit. And again, if you're wondering how long you should be holding it, you could always just keep on playing with your putty until you realize it's no longer moving on you. That's all you need to do. Hang on to it for a moment. Alright, so I'm back to reassembling my keychain core here. I'm going to reassemble it completely using the one piece that I had originally glued in between these two. Move it to the back here. If you have spare edge pieces, you can leave that out, but for the sake of this demo, I'm going to assume I don't have an extra. And also, again, despite not having the filled in pieces for the edges and making this harder on myself to do this, I'm going to go ahead and do this because when you reassemble the puzzle completely like this, when you're aligning pieces, you get better alignment because all the pieces, all the gaps, the natural gaps are filled in, and every piece is where it should be. There we go. Now, I have said to be careful with the extra temporary attachments here, and also to be careful with the temporary edge, the middle edge pieces. You'll notice actually one of the white extensions broke off, and if you take a look here, you can see significant gaps. These gaps are again because the two initial our template pieces that we're using were only perfectly aligned for one center point, and that was the center point that these two shared together. That's why on the back side doesn't look so good. And so all we got to do now is put in our second piece, our second edge piece here, which I've put on a couple of, again, pieces of post-it notes. That's going to go here. And one thing to just keep in mind, of course, always make sure you give yourself a few rotations for good luck and good alignment. So I'm just going to rotate that just like that. That piece is going to go in this way, and just keep in mind that you also want to make sure that the edges here are in perfect alignment with each other. Alright, so again, I hear my post-it notes are falling apart on me. That doesn't really matter. You're just about done with all this excess stuff. No more post-it notes, no more extensions, no more temporary middle edges. You're pretty much done. Mix up a second batch of epoxy, stick on the corner, give it a few more minutes, wait, and you'll be ready to go.